All right, folks, we're going to get started here in just a moment. I just wanted to provide another reminder. You are currently muted upon entry, and so if you'd like to join in the conversation, please do so by using the raise your hand function. If you're joined with us by computer, you can see that I just raised my hand in the participant box there, so if you have any questions about that. We can also communicate with you through the chat box. So just go ahead and give a chat to Kelly Mears or Julie Dennis, and we'll come and address your questions. We'll also be stopping for questions throughout the presentation. So otherwise, without any further ado, we will go ahead and proceed to Julie Dennis.
All right, I'm going to speak loudly. It seems like some folks are having trouble hearing, and that could just be the acoustics on our end. Again, this will be recorded, so if you miss any part of the presentation, it will be up on the NRC sometime next week. So first of all, welcome and thank you for joining us. 2018 reaccreditation process. This is the kickoff officially to the 2018 reaccreditation season, if it can be called that. And we're really excited and have a robust agenda for you today. Okay. So we have the reaccreditation components and process, the document storage and review, the 2018 reaccreditation timeline. We will then stop for questions, and then I will be doing a demonstration on Box.com featuring my favorite, kidding, you're all my favorite affiliates, CIS of Honolulu. So, without further ado, reaccreditation components and process.
Can you pause for a second?
Yep.
If folks could raise their hand if they can hear us currently. We've gotten a couple notes that folks can't hear us. We just want to make sure that if that's a problem on our end or if that's a problem on the, if that's a problem locally.
And I would be interested, are you just calling in through, are you called in through the phone or are you only on WebEx through the computer application?
So if you can raise your hand if you can hear us.
I'm seeing a couple hands raised here.
Yeah.
We have 5 or 6. Oh yeah, they're popping up. Great.
Yeah.
All right, so if you can't hear us,
Awesome. I would recommend dialing in as opposed to trying to listen in through the computer because we are in a conference room. I think the computer, although it's great because you get to see, it's just not as good for hearing. So my recommendation would be call that number that's in the invite.
And if you can't find that number right away, go to the top of your screen and hit audio. You'll find that number in there.
Okay, so we're going to continue if that's all right with folks on the phone or on the computers. So the reaccreditation process objectives, why do we go through this process? So to back up a little bit, just wanted to reiterate that in January of 2016, we released what we call TQS 2.0, which are an upgrade to the TQS 1.0 standards. And these standards really were taken from best practices in the nonprofit world for the business practices. And then for student support, of course, we take best practices from the field, the work that is done in the schools with the students that you serve every day. So we have this reaccreditation process, and the reason that we decided to do reaccreditation, the reason that we kind of upped the standards was, first of all, to maintain network alignment with the standards across our network. We also want to make sure that we are really putting responsibility for ongoing alignment with the executive director, the board of directors, and then of course we want to make the reaccreditation is really a way to also make us resilient to changes such as an ED transition or a board chair transition or other transitions that your affiliate might go through during your life cycle. So we want to make sure that I want to reiterate that reaccreditation is not something that just comes up every 3 years. The whole point is to really make all of these best practices from the nonprofit operations world, the business standards, part of basically your daily operations. And so that's kind of what the goal is with reaccreditation as well, is to just kind of get you in the flow and on the schedule of knowing what you're going to go over with your board and moving yourself forward with strategic plans and annual operations plans. And we see reaccreditation and the TQS 2.0 standards that coincide with it as a way to do that. So that is why. For the components, we have 4 components, and we'll be talking about 3 of them today. So the first one is, the alignment with the TQS standards. Every 3 years, you participate in the national reaccreditation process by uploading documentation. We also have affirmations, which are letters for the ED and the board chair affirming and just kind of answering some questions that we might not be able to see through the documentation that you provide on box.com. We have assessments. Those are ad hoc, and that's actually the one that we're not going to be going into in depth this webinar. And then lastly, we have the site visits and verifications process, which we will discuss later. If you're selected for a site visit, you will the national office will come up to you, and we will review some documentation and your operations. And then if you're selected for the verification procedure, we will go through that as well, and basically you're just required to provide us some additional data materials that, again, we will discuss, so don't worry about that right now. All right. So for component one, the reaccreditation year details. So we start up here with the alignment for TQS standards, and we have basically what's going to happen is we have a national office review, and that will happen, and we'll talk dates at the end with our timeline, but we review all the documents. For those of us who like to keep track of numbers, we have 46 business standards and 20 student support standards, and there's a team of us on the national office, at the national office who, review those documents. We then go to the governance committee, and then they vote on either putting you in extension or reaccreditation, and I'll discuss that momentarily. The state offices can help you if you have a state office. If you don't have a state office, then your point of contact with, direct communication, potential site visits. If you have questions about the standards or you're unsure if your documentation meets the standards, the state offices, point of contacts are great folks. And of course, we encourage you to reach out to national office. We will be doing, this review, and we look at everything very in depth. And so if you have questions before that deadline for Reaccreditation 2018, we highly encourage you to reach out. And this actually goes to a larger theme over the course of this webinar that I want to really hone in on, and that's really communication. And we are very committed for the Standards and Accountability team to increase communication this year with our cohort going through the 2018 process. And we ask that you also, be as communicative with us as possible. If you have questions, let us know. So that's component one. But who is this governance committee? So the governance committee is made up of 7 folks, 3 senior staff here at the national office, 3 people who are state office leadership, and then 1 local affiliate leader. And basically, they are the governing body for accreditation, reaccreditation, questions that come up about TQS. They basically are the go-to for us. And so because of that, they vote on your reaccreditation. And so they either vote to put you in extension or to reaccredit when that vote comes up. So we had extension timelines, typically 90 days, 6 months, and for the 2018 cohort, up to a year. And I want to emphasize a couple of things here. So first of all 35 affiliates that were in the 2017 cohort had findings and received an extension. And we anticipated that, and I want to let you know that findings are okay. We know that these standards are quite rigorous. They are meant to be. They are the best practices out there for nonprofits. And so having a finding or receiving a finding at the end of this process does not mean that you are a bad affiliate or that we as National look down on you in any way. We are really here to help you through this process. And so I just want to make it clear that findings are expected and anticipated, and we just would ask that you do the best that you can, and of course reach out for questions if you have any. The other thing that I want to quickly mention on this is that, as I mentioned, the governance committee votes on reaccreditation and accreditation, and they also vote on exemptions. And an exemption is a process that we outlined last year that if you're affiliate, you must demonstrate a need, first of all, but if for some reason your affiliate feels that they cannot meet any of the requirements for reaccreditation 2018, if you have a state office, you reach out to your state office, and the state office fills out that exemption form on behalf of you. And then if you don't have a state office, your point of contact will fill out that exemption form. I want to make it clear that exemptions are really for very certain circumstances. So in the past, we've seen exemptions, for example, if your state If a state law prohibits you from doing something, that would be rule for exemption. If there is something geographically particular about where you are, that might be cause for an exemption. And so those are just kind of some examples. If a standard is just hard to meet or you're not sure what happens or what's needed to meet a standard, that is not cause for an exemption. That is something that we will be happy to help you through. So those are kind of the points. Chris, do you have anything you wanted to add on those?
Right, and I think you hit all the points. Just wanted to reemphasize that if you do have a state office, the state office is the submitting body for that exemption. Those are reviewed initially by our team and then reviewed by the governance committee. So as Julie said, all things sort of TQS are approved by the TQS governance committee. So we don't make that decision here at National. The exemptions are processed through that. I would also ask that folks who are considering exemptions or exemption requests that you take some time to submit those exemption requests prior to the deadline for submitting documentation for your reaccreditation. That's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a request that we're going to be making and encouraging. We don't want exemptions to be a response to findings. That's really not the intent of exemptions. Exemptions are you have reviewed the standards, you feel it impossible for your affiliate to meet a specific standard for the circumstances, some of the examples that Julie laid out, and that is why you're submitting an exemption, not simply because there's a finding and waiting to hear from us about whether or not you have met a standard or not. So we ask that those exemptions are submitted kind of as you are thinking through the TQS process, not just in response to the report that you would receive following your review.
Great. All right, so moving on to component 2, the affirmations. So we have board chair and executive director affirmations. These affirmations are based on new questions from 2017. So they are new. So if you saw 2017 questions, these questions for 2018 are updated, and that is actually indicated in the document title. The other thing I would say about affirmations is that the affirmation needs to be signed. That was something that was somewhat missed last year as well. I would like to say that the reason we do these affirmations is because we cannot possibly visit and interview all 39 of you in the cohort for 2018. So these affirmation questions are really in lieu of the interviews, and they also help us give more insight into the daily operations of your affiliate and answer questions that might not be able to be answered by simply looking at your personnel policies, for example. So they're just a way to give us some more information, and again, the ED and the board chair will complete those. So the fourth component are the site visits and verification procedures, and I'm going to turn that over to my colleague, Kelly Mears, who's going to explain about that.
Sure. So this is the sort of final piece of our reaccreditation process, and not every affiliate who's on the phone today is going to be undergoing a site visit and or a verification procedure review. So we select 10% of the cohort to go through the site visit process and additional verification procedure process, both of those processes. In addition to that, we selected a second 10% of the cohort to undergo solely the verification procedures review. And so why exactly do we do these? These just give us an opportunity to kind of check in with the affiliate on a more specific level. So those site visits give us an additional insight into your operations. They give us a chance to speak with you on site, speak with your staff. These are similar to the reviews that the site visits that you received when you went through your accreditation. So they're generally about a day and a half. We're going to be interviewing your board and your staff and your being on site with your students, and that's just those will happen in September. And so while you have not been notified yet, don't worry, you're not missing anything here. We will be reaching out to you in the next 2 or so weeks to let you know if you are selected for a site visit. Those who are selected for site visits are selected randomly. for that 10%, but we are also sort of able to conduct site visits to any affiliate should there be any reasons, such as significant findings or things that come to mind that really sort of spark an interest in kind of furthering a conversation on site and seeing some of those sort of real practice on-site interviews that are necessary there. In addition, so those verification procedures that we'll be going through, so 10% and an additional 10% will be going through the verification procedures, sort of at a high level. What those are additional reviews where we are going to be requesting source data to help us confirm the data that you've already entered into system, just to make sure that you are sort of in compliance with business standards 3.8, 3.11, and 3.12. So as you should be well aware, you are sort of expected to be undergoing your own verifications of your parent-guardian consent forms twice a year and your data at least once a year before EOI, and you should be keeping your background checks sort of up to date for active staff. And this will give us an opportunity to take a deeper dive and make sure that those are sort of happening on a regular basis, that these practices are happening consistently, and that we're kind of addressing any outlying problems or concerns with conducting those verifications. So we'll reach out to you within the next 2 weeks to let you know if you've been selected for a site visit or a verification and/or a verification review. And we'll ask you to select a site visit at that time, a site visit date at that time, and we'll send you a link for a webinar that we'll be hosting in March that will kind of dive into these procedures a lot deeper, and so give you an opportunity to take a look deep at the timeline there, and kind of get a clear expectation of what we expect from you in this process, what you can expect from us in this process, and have a little bit of a deeper dive there. All right. Before we switch on to the next section, I did want to ask folks to just take a look at your participant handle and see if your hand is raised, because we're using that to monitor whether anyone has questions. And I think some folks have some hands up still, and we just want to make sure that we can address any questions that are outstanding if those are not actual questions.
And I just wanted to make one quick thing about the site visits, is that we will not be having site visits during Leadership Town Hall this year. This year, Leadership Town Hall is the second week, roughly, of September, and so, of course, we want to give you the opportunity to attend if you can, and so we do not want to have a site visit during that time. So we will not be, that will be one of the dates that is blocked off from the student. Okay. Are there any questions coming in? Otherwise, we'll move to document storage and review. I have time for questions at the end before we do our demo, and so we're happy to, of course, take one off, but I think it's best if we kind of get through the material and then we can stop for questions. Hopefully that will work. So document storage and review, Box.com introduction. So Box.com is a file sharing service that uses cloud-based tools to store and share any type of file, and BoxSync allows you to maintain your file structure from your desktop. So a few things. First of all, it's very important that you should not be paying for Box.com. That is a cost that the national office incurs on behalf of our affiliates. You probably received some sort of link. All I think you have to do is type in your email and create a password, and you should have access to your account with all of your documents in it. So that brings me to my second point. If you do not have access to Box.com, and you're having trouble gaining access to Box.com, please let us know. We want to make sure that we make this process as easy as possible for you, and of course the file where you would store all your files makes the process easier, so if you can't access that, it would probably be very difficult. So let us know, and send us an email, and we will work with you on that.
And one other item around access, so we typically invite executive and have invited executive directors to their Box.com folders that we host on our account. If you need additional staff members accessing those files because they are supporting the process, we are happy to open that up to anybody who creates a Box.com account with their CIS affiliate email, and then we would give them access to that as well. So it doesn't have to be limited to one person or whomever has been invited in the past. And also, if there are sort of staffing transitions, we try to clean up as best we can Box.com access. So if you notice that folks who should not have access to your Box.com folders for TQS still do. We can remove those on our end. And then also if you have, again, sort of staffing transitions, if you need to replace those folks with additional, with somebody new, then you can do that. Also, if you are an affiliate with a state office, your state office has access to your Box.com folder, and as do, obviously, we have access to your Box.com folder. So if there are things you do not wish to be seen either by us because it's not appropriate for you to share that documentation, personnel files, things like that. I know a lot of folks use Box.com to store a lot of different documents. Make sure that it does not go into the folder that we have created for you because we will always have access to that and can see that. We do not want to see things we should not be seeing. So just make sure that you're kind of cognizant of what you're putting in there and aware of that. But feel free to use Box.com as you see fit for your own cloud storage locally if you'd like to do so.
And just one final note, you are not required to use Box Sync. Box Sync is data mirroring that mirrors data that's stored on Box to your desktop, and so I will actually be doing the demo. I can show you the Box Sync, and then I will also be going through the browser. So you can definitely access Box.com through a web browser, or if you'd like, you can sync it, and it mirrors. So that means you can work offline, and it will save when you reconnect to the internet. But it is not required that you use Box Sync. It's just an option. Okay, so document storage and review. So when you go into your Box.com folder, there is an FY 2018 reaccreditation folder, FY18 reaccreditation folder, and that has the files that you will upload, of which you will upload your files to those specific folders. There's lots of subfolders in there, which we'll get into momentarily. If you went through a previous accreditation or reaccreditation, those documents are in a totally separate folder, and we thought that it would be easiest to organize the folders for reaccreditation by standard with the exception of affirmations. So you'll see there the business documents, student support standards, and general use services documents. There is an overall guide at the bottom. Some folks like to print it out, and then as they're going through, it's actually a checklist, so you can check it off. And so that's optional. We don't look at that information necessarily, but if you want to provide an update to it, that's fine. It's really just a tool for you. And then lastly, if you are going to go through verifications, as Kelly mentioned, we will be making that announcement in a few weeks. You will receive an additional folder at the bottom, and that's where you'll upload all of those verification documents that we will be discussing shortly in a few weeks. So that is document storage and review, and now we're going to dive a little deeper into each specific folder. So affirmations, as I mentioned, we have the ED and board chair. Please note again that the questions have changed, and that's reflected in the title, the required 2018 board chair and required 2018 ED. We also have a guide that you can pull out. You can make notes on it. You can kind of let us know the last time you updated it, and this, of course, kind of goes to this idea of we can only look at what you upload. So if you want us to look at something, you have to upload it. And even if you think that something is missing certain aspects of standards, for example, we would still ask that you upload it. That's just a way for us to see, how far along you are with the standard, and it just gives us a better sense of what needs to be accomplished, as opposed to seeing that something was supposed to be uploaded and we received no documentation. So I just want you to be to keep track of that, or to keep that in mind as we go through the process. Definitely more uploading is better than no uploading, so just keep that in mind.
And just to reiterate that point, that is really an advantage for you all. So if we don't have something to review, I think folks who have gone through this process and we are, incredibly appreciative and understand kind of the work that it takes to update these policies, and procedures and provide the right type of documentation that addresses the intent of the standard. So I think one piece is, even if you have not been able to or been in a position where you feel totally comfortable that what you're submitting addresses the intent of the standard and meets the specificity of the standard, we, on the review side, we may find that it does. And so there may be, where you think you may be missing 5 components, we may say, actually, you're only missing 1 component, because as we review and have seen examples from the rest of the network, we understand that you are meeting the intent of the standard based on these other policies included here or other things that you have uploaded. So I think that's one piece that is an advantage to you all, to make sure that you are uploading documents. So even if your employee handbook or personnel policies you do not feel fully meet the standards and you plan to update those down the line to address those, still upload what you have so that we can review it. The other advantage to you all is what ends up happening on the review side and how the TQS Governance Committee has addressed findings related to missing documentation is that those extension periods are much shorter. So we operate on the assumption that the document exists and simply needs to be uploaded, and that it was just missed and not uploaded. So whereas if we see a document that does require a change, we will consider the work that we feel probably will need to take place to be able to make a change to that document or that policy. So for example, if you are missing transportation of students within your personnel policies, we would likely give you a longer period of extension to write that policy, include it in your personnel policies, put it in front of your board for approval, have legal counsel review it if you want legal counsel to review it, et cetera, versus if we are simply missing a document, we are likely going to give you a 90-day extension on that particular finding just to upload, because we're going to, that's based on the assumption that you do have personnel policies, and we're going to ask for them more quickly than we would if there was going to be, if we know that it is just a change, it is a change to the policies that needs to happen. So very important, just reiterating the point that Julie made, very important that you upload what you have, and regardless of whether you feel totally comfortable that it's, you know, perfectly meeting the standard.
All right, so then we have business documents, and business documents are kind of broken out into these board operations and then board staff and volunteer folders, which we'll dive into, but then 1 through 7 are broken out by standard, so you can see those. And then within each folder, there is a guide in there as well, so that you know what belongs in each folder, and that guide only lists what is uploaded in that folder. And again, I know I'm kind of going through this very abstract. I think that you might get a better sense when I do the demo at the end of what I'm talking about. Okay, so going into that board operations. So when you click on board operations, you're brought to a screen that has minutes for periodic board approvals, most recent 12 months, the guide, and then a required board approval calendar. So the minutes for periodic board approvals are things like your mission statement, maybe your strategic plan if you did it a couple of years ago, whereas the most recent 12 months of board meetings are the most recent 12 months of board meeting minutes, and agendas, and any financials or anything that really you included to your board during that time, during those meetings. Again, this guide, as all of the subfolders have guides just telling you what needs to be included. And then this year we're actually, basically the guide we translated into a required board approval calendar. And this really, we are requiring it, so that's new this year, but then B, it's really a way for you to track quarterly what you're doing with your board and just kind of see how your board's functioning. And I actually think that you might feel it's a really good tool to use, so that's our hope.
And this document is really helping us. What we found, it's in response to the process from 2017, and that's why we're requiring it. So I understand that's kind of an additional piece for you all to fill out and complete. But what this is helping us do is identify within your board minutes and your board documentation where you are addressing each of the sort of required board documentation that is throughout the standard. So there's several board approvals, as you know, different types of reporting and financial monitoring that occurs with your board. And so what this is going to allow us to do is make sure that we don't miss those what we found was that we were missing those pieces because, as you can imagine, kind of digging through some of those board documentation, some things may be overlooked, some things may be misinterpreted as we're reviewing them, and so this gives us the opportunity to kind of get some assurances from you all, and for you to have kind of some assurance that we are looking in the right place for the evidence of meeting those standards. So it's going to help us get to a point where we're not providing a finding to you all that you immediately respond back to us and say, here it is, I uploaded it months ago, why didn't you see it? We are, better positioned to track those items down.
And in the spirit of continuous improvement, we noticed that since Box opened on December 1st, we were actually missing board policies, which is Business Standard 3.1, in that required calendar. So we've added it in and replaced the previous document. But if, let's say on December 2nd, you were very eager to start your reaccreditation process and you downloaded the calendar to your desktop, you'll just want to add in a line item for 3.1, or you could download the new one and transfer over where you've filled in the calendar. But just to let you know that that's been updated only in the past couple of weeks since Box officially opened. So moving to board staff, board, and volunteers. So in this folder, again, we have the guide. We also have a tracker that is not required, but we would highly recommend it to be used. We think that it will be a benefit for you because it will track it basically is tracking everything. So we require board member start dates, staff member information, volunteer information, and this tracker kind of tracks it all. Now, of course, if you have your own trackers or own way of getting us that information, that's totally fine. You would just upload it. For example, if you just have a volunteer log of some sort, you would just probably upload that in the volunteer folder. If you have information and you want to just copy and paste it into our tracker, that's another way that might save time as opposed to filling it out from the get-go. But we would just highly encourage that you just try to use as many of the tools that we provide as possible because, like we said, going through this process last year, we just noticed that there were some things that we're trying to improve upon for this year, and this is one of those improvements. All right. So now we get into, remember, we're still in that business standards folder, and then we get specifically into standards 1 through 7. So when you log in or go in, you'll see, for example, Business Standard 1 has the guide, and then it only has 2 folders. And you'll say, well, there's more than 2 standards in Business Standard 1. That's correct, but we are only requiring you to upload documentation for 2 of them. So you'll upload the documentation for 1.2 and 1.4 in their respective folders. As I mentioned before, again, one other thing about uploading. So let's say you have an employee handbook, and an employee handbook covers maybe a variety of the standards. Instead of having to upload each one for each standard in each folder, for example, if you have a personnel policy that fits standards 3.4, 3.5, and 3.6, you can just upload it into 3.5 and then write us a box.com note, which I will be demoing, telling us that the standard 3.4, which is about financial management, is actually included, financial policies is actually included in the personnel handbook. And again, this just goes back to communication. We can only evaluate what we see, and so, just by letting us know, oh, look here, we will be better equipped to assess you accurately.
And Julie's going to demo the box.com notes, but what I also wanted to just emphasize is that, we are not going to sort of go MIA on during this process. So if either prior to, during the review, you will be receiving communication from us, but also please feel free to reach out to us during that process to let us know, clarify things that you have uploaded, ask us questions about, hey, I submitted my personnel policies in this folder, but there are a couple things that aren't included in our personnel policies, so I've included them elsewhere. Those types of communications are really helpful for us as reviewers, so we can provide or have the best context for what we are looking at, and ultimately provide the most accurate sort of report back on findings. And so, yes, the Box.com notes is one way for you to communicate with us. You may use the guides and type in anything you want in those guides and save them back on Box.com. We open them up to make sure that if folks do leave us notes in there, you can upload a Word document that includes some notes as well, or send us an email. So the Box.com notes, I feel like, is probably the easiest way to do that because it's directly associated with what you're uploading, but we will receive those communications or clarifications from you all any way that makes sense for you to send those. So we really encourage folks to do that. There's people behind the emails that you receive, and so don't think that you can't reach out, phone, email, or any other way you'd like.
So then, if we back out of the business standards and go into the student support documents, the affiliates must upload related documents for CS model schools up to a maximum of 5. So if you have 10 CS model schools, you get to pick those 5. If you only have 4 model schools, then you just upload all of them for all 4 into their respective folders. Again, I would suggest pulling up that guide. It will tell you precisely what you need to upload in each of those folders. And also as a recommendation, just maybe to make it easier on you, I don't know, I find it easier, you can actually rename the folders to the schools that you're providing information. So School 1 for CS of Honolulu will be Sunshine Elementary, I think. I'm going to show you how to do it. So. Similarly, general youth services, we're requiring GYS schools up to a maximum of 3. So if you don't have any GYS schools, then you do not need to upload anything. If you only have 1 GYS school, then you only need to upload 1. If you have 7 GYS schools, then you pick your 3 that you'd like to upload. And of course, we are going to be tracking this and verifying it. We verify GYS as well as CAS model implementation through SYSDEM and for Texas through systems through a report that you will give us. And so we do check and verify that what you are calling a model school is in fact a model school, and same thing with GYS. All right, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about model implementation. Chris?
Yep, so there's 2 additional requirements that are not included in the actual standards themselves, and so most of you should be well aware of these. We provided a lot of communication. There's actually a page on the NRC with additional details, and we provided some webinars on this as well, which you can access. But did want to just re-emphasize it for this cohort as you all come through the 2018 reaccreditation process. So those 2 requirements are that at least 51% of your annual expenditures for the year that, well, every year, but when we review you, is the year that we will be looking at, that 51% of those annual expenditures are dedicated to developing and implementing the CIS model. That does not mean that 51% of your expenditures must go directly to site coordinator salaries, supplies at each school. What we include within that 51% expenditure group could be your advocacy efforts as you talk about expanding CIS model implementation, administrative salaries and support of model implementation, so on and so forth. And so, but what we're essentially focused on here is how you are dividing sort of your expenditures toward any general use services or other programming that you may be conducting as an affiliate, that at least 51% of those are dedicated to model implementation. And the second requirement here is that at least 2 of your CIS model schools meet 100% of the comprehensive school standards. And so what that means is, so all CIS model schools are required to meet the comprehensive school standards, all of them with the exception of saturation. At least 2 must meet the saturation requirements that we've laid out. So that's 10% case management saturation in schools that are 1,000 student population and below, and then 5% for those above 1,000 student population. So those are the 2 model implementation requirements. For the expenditure requirement, we will be looking at your budgets as you've outlined them for the year. And then, but if you do not believe your budget is clear enough for us to determine that 51% expenditure requirement, we do have a tool that you can use to explain that to us. If we look at your budget and feel that we cannot fully understand whether you're meeting that 51% expenditure requirement, we may reach out and ask you to complete this tool or provide additional documentation that helps clarify your expenditures. This tool is available on the National Resource Center. It's the CIS model versus GIS expenditure accounting template. And it just basically looks at and provides some categories, and you're welcome to edit it if you categorize your expenditures in different ways, but looks at your functional expenditures and divides them out between model and GIS and provides the percent of the total for all of that. And so if you do have a state office, I'd recommend reaching out to them because they're familiar with this tool. Some of them have looked at it and created their own for their own networks to be able to demonstrate. Like I said, we didn't want you to have to complete a new document and a new sort of expenditure accounting tool if you didn't need to, if your budgets are clear enough and kind of mark the color of the money and where your expenditures are going to in terms of how, be it between the model or GIS or other, but if it is easier for you to complete this in order to demonstrate the 51% requirement, you can. So I know we'll have some time for questions. This is an additional requirement that we have outlined. It is probably also the most common exemption request. I will be sort of, again, just to reemphasize sort of the exemption pieces that we talked about earlier. It is unlikely that we will provide, or that I shouldn't say we, that the governance committee would provide exemptions related to the two model schools unless there is, very specific circumstances or geographic circumstances why it would not be possible to be in at least two schools with the CIS model within your community. The 51% expenditures exemption is something that's a little bit more common, but I will say is still very rare for the governance committee to approve. That said, some of those approvals are time limited because we ask within the exemption form how you will move beyond, if you are currently at 30% of your expenditures toward the model, how you will move toward 51%, and if that's demonstrable within a certain period of time, as you've outlined, that is typically the time limitation that the governance committee is going to provide to meet that requirement. If you can demonstrate that there's a sort of an impossibility for ever reaching that requirement, then the governance committee may consider that. But just wanted to put that out there.
Great. We only have a few more slides, and then we will stop for questions. So we will get to them momentarily. Rules of the road. So there's a few different things that we would like to point out here. So reviewers are not limited to the documentation provided on box. For example, if you hand something in or you hand in your collection of things on the reaccreditation deadline, and for some reason it's recommended that we actually do a site visit, we can make that decision come this summer. That is outside of the 10% randomly chosen that would receive site visits in September as well. So just be cognizant of the fact that we might come back to you and ask for some clarifying documentation or do a site visit, etc. So again, box is for you to use, and so we want you to use it to your fullest advantage. Change the folder names to the schools if it's helpful. Print out the guides or download them and make notes if that's helpful, and re-upload. Whatever it is to help you do your best through this Reaccreditation 2018 process, you should do. So again, maintaining Box.com on an ongoing basis. Reaccreditation is not something that you do just once every 3 years. When Nationals tells you that you're up for reaccreditation, you should be maintaining these documents, and if you've been maintaining them, it will make the reaccreditation process go much smoother. I would also recommend, just for, again, our help, just to help us, is just use clear naming conventions, so CIS of Honolulu FY18 AOP, for example, or CIS of Honolulu meeting minutes from January of 2018. Also, check out if you're unsure about the standards, check them out. They're on the NRC. We've done a lot of work in the last year since they came out in January in 2016. We did a whole webinar series last year, and so that's up on the NRC. And so I would just encourage you to use all the tools on the NRC that are possible, and you know, ask questions if you have questions about certain indicators within the standard. And so without that, yeah, I can, if we have time, I might even be able to show you on the NRC where some of those webinars are stored. All right, moving on. And so I think that, you know, us trying really to be cognizant of the process of reaccreditation, like I mentioned with last year, creating a webinar series on the standards, and as I've mentioned throughout, you know, the course of this webinar, that really communication is a huge focus for us for Reaccreditation 2018. And so what can you expect from us when we say communication? So we will be more consistent in emails, including specific emails to affiliates undergoing site visits and or verification procedures, as Kelly mentioned. We will be also having that webinar specifically for the verification folks. We are going to be having monthly webinars, which we're going to call sticky standards. So this is using information and data that we have collected from Reaccreditation 2017 to see, to basically kind of show you what was commonly missed last year and maybe explain why, if we have insight into that as well. And then we will also be, in the sticky standards webinars, be having open office hours, which is just a chance for you to come on in and ask questions, or not ask questions and just listen. I think that that's another thing. I really want to create a community of the 39 affiliates going through reaccreditation this year. So if you are, you know, a Texas affiliate and you know of another Texas affiliate and you have a question, you know, definitely I want you to create your own ability to talk to each other about this process, and then talk to us, and we'll all talk to each other, and it'll be a great community of reaccreditation. And so lastly, each affiliate, and this is new this year as well, will receive a designated person from the national staff who will kind of do check-ins with them, answer questions, just kind of get a temperature check on where you are, and we'll be doing that kind of throughout the spring. Then the deadline will hit, and we'll still be peppering that in throughout the review process. So as we really strive to be communicative with you, I'm requesting that you be as communicative with me and us on the team, and that, you know, any questions that you have, please reach out. I love being stumped. It's a great way for me to learn, and for me to pass on what I've learned to you if I get a question that I don't know the answer to right away. So that is that. And now we're going to talk about timelines, and I'm going to turn that over to Kelly.
Great. Thank you. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Oh, sorry.
No,
that would be helpful.
So you should have all received an email from Julie earlier, I believe in December, letting you know that Box.com was open to you. We did open up that Box structure for you at the beginning of December. And that box is going to remain open for you. I say open with quotes here, up to June 2018. As Chris mentioned earlier, those box folders are available to you at any time to store documents sort of beyond this reaccreditation year, but that folder for sort of our review purposes is going to be open to you until June 1st. So today sort of is this January 2017 reaccreditation process webinar. So we are committing, obviously, today to providing you this information, and moving forward throughout the spring, as Julie mentioned, the sticky standards webinars will be continuing on sort of as you're going through this document uploading period. If you look in the center there, that June 2018 date, should be January 2018, excuse me. That June 2018, June 1st, all of your documentation should be uploaded into Box.com at that time. That's our official closing date, but I think Julie's already mentioned it at least once, and sort of rehammering down on that communications piece. If there are certain things like data or certain board meetings that need to happen after that date, just let us know. We will talk with you. We will work out whatever it is we need to work out, let you know how we can kind of work around that June 1st date should there be, we need to hold on pulling your data around student support standards, any of that sort of information. So just let us know.
So after June 1st, the national office will begin our review period of sort of your documents. Like Chris said, we will not be going black during this time. We will be communicating with you to keep you updated on sort of how those reviews are going and when we anticipate getting you in front of the governance committee, which will be around sort of September. And so at that point in time, we'll start doing our site visits. We will have completed our verification checks by this time. So if you are undergoing verification this June through September period, you'll get some more specific information in the webinar in a few weeks, but that's when you're going to be doing your sort of verification uploading and providing us source data. After September, once those reviews have been completed and the site visits have been completed, we will be presenting all of this information to the TQS Governance Committee, and they will be voting in sort of the fall and winter to sort of decide on what extensions are necessary, and then from there we'll be reaching out to you and your accompanying state office to let you know what extension or if you've been granted for reaccreditation, what extensions have been offered at that time.
And I would just ask that you just be patient with us as we work through. As I mentioned, there are 46 standards in business and 20 standards in student supports that we look at, and so it takes us some time to review and then get reports gathered for the governance committee. So that is why it might seem like a very long time from June till fall/winter of 2018, but we are working very diligently, and you will be receiving periodic updates on that work. But just to let you know that we don't anticipate the governance committee voting until the fall.
Yeah, and just so you all know that is in response to this most recent process from 2017. The 2017 cohort, we just had our final votes actually last week. A lot of that was us getting used to this process, the new standards, how we're reviewing under those new standards, the type of documentation we have to look at, and what the most efficient and effective process for conducting these reviews is. So we're continuing, just as Julie said, we are continuing to learn through this process what it's going to take to be able to do all that we have set out to do, how to make sure that we are not creating too much of a burden both on ourselves but also on you all to address these standards. And so we kept that flexibility in that fall-winter period. Ideally, we do wrap things up in the fall, but there are a few dozen affiliates going through, and that means, and with all that we have to accomplish, just want to make sure that we are as communicative with you all as possible around and kind of upfront and honest about where we think we might land in terms of timing. And we also hope that this sort of new communications push of sort of continuous contact throughout this process, reaching out to you just following the June deadline to kind of conduct an initial review of what is uploaded and reach out to you and let you know, like, hey, we think we're missing a few things. Initially, can you let us know what the statuses of those are, is going to help us move this process along more quickly as well.
Great. And a question came in the chat box that I think is relevant to address us right now, just because it has to do specifically with timelines. So just to clarify when that TQS data will be pulled from system, and Julia, I don't know if we...
So I actually don't know if we have a set date. I think that because System 2.0 for this school year is so new, and because of the fluctuation of our network, some schools end in May, some schools end in June. So I believe that what we will do is I will work with the Director of Data Quality here at National, and we will find a date. And you'll be notified of that. So if we say, for example, June 10th, and you say, oh no, I won't have my data in until July 1st, then we will, we will either A, assess and just pull all the data on July 1st, or B, just pull your specific affiliate's data on July 1st. And we did do that last year for Reaccreditation 2017, and so that's just a practice that will continue. But again, I think a lot of folks last year maybe felt apprehensive about asking for those couple extra weeks, and you shouldn't. If you know that your end of year data won't be getting in until July 1st, let us know.
Yeah, and I would say that what we'll probably do is begin reviews around business standards for each affiliate first, so that we can make sure that there's enough period of time for you all to wrap up data entry in system. I will emphasize, and just kind of carrying a message forward from Gretchen O'Sullivan, who you all know, that data should be entered on a regular basis, not just waited until the end of the year or the end of even a grading period to enter. And so what we want to make sure, so what we're really looking at for that is as you're doing sort of your wrap-up data verifications, as you're completing EOI entries and EOI status, as you're completing goal achievement and all of that, we are absolutely understanding and cognizant of the time it takes to do that for site coordinators and case managers and program directors to go in and do that work. So we will be flexible on our end, both in terms of your timelines, but also the timelines, the expected timelines of when those things should be completed anyway. And also, as Julie mentioned, just to reiterate, knowing that the system is new for most folks in the network this year, and so we'll be cognizant of that as well. So if we come out and say, to you all that we're going to pull data on X date and that doesn't work, just let us know, and we will wait. There will be a certain point where we can wait no longer, but in the meantime, we'll be conducting the reviews of the business standards to keep that moving along.
Yeah. And that will keep us very busy. All right, so I'm going to move Kelly to the webinar schedule. Great, that I mentioned.
Yep, so as I mentioned in the timeline here, so we're committing to doing these sort of webinars from now through sort of the summertime, basically leading right up into your reaccreditation deadline. So Julie will talk a little bit further about the Tweaks to New Standards webinar that we'll be having later on this month. But I also wanted to make sure that you are well aware that these are live links. You'll have this presentation in your inboxes after we finish up here, so that you can click on these wonderful links and sign up to register for the Tweaks to New Standards webinar that we'll be having later this month, and the sticky standards and open office hours that we alluded to earlier. You can go ahead and put those on your calendar now so that you are aware of when we're having office hours, and you can say, hey, tomorrow they're having office hours and I have this question about Box.com, and you can kind of ask us at that time. And so those standards, webinars are going to be sort of similar to what we had last year, where we're kind of diving into some of the standards. We will be addressing the standards that we recognize that were difficult from last year, that are sort of tend to be more confusing or need any sort of additional clarifications. But we're also going to be available for those sort of one-off questions, whether that's how do I download BoxSync, or hey, I'm not sure what's going on with this documentation, is this correct? As Chris kind of mentioned, we really, really want to hammer down that we're sort of a two-way street here. We're open for these questions, and so those office hours are going to be an opportunity for you to sort of open that door there.
And they're not required, they're just a tool for you. So if you can't make them, or if you don't want to make them, that's fine. We will record them and put them on the NRC for your use. All right, and actually the Tweaks to Standards will be taken by Chris. Passing the ball on that one.
Yep, absolutely. So each year we have committed to conducting sort of a thorough review of the standards, how folks are addressing those with documentation, determining which standards may need some additional clarification, which standards are, not which standards necessarily, but which components of the standards are potentially excessive, where we're finding some areas where there are some risks that are bubbling up in our network that we have not been able to address with standards. And so what we did was we committed to the network when we launched the revised TQS 2.0 standards that we would not conduct ongoing changes or tweaks or adjustments to the standards and requirements and indicators. Throughout a year, we would do that on an annual basis, and so we were doing that at the beginning of each calendar year in January. So that is always going to be the case. So I know that there is some concern about, well, this is my reaccreditation year, and now you're announcing changes, and you all are getting ready. We have to set, no matter where we put it throughout the year, it's going to impact somebody who is going through a reaccreditation, so it simply has to happen. Just so you know, the tweaks that we've made to standards are either reflective of requirements that we have already announced changes to. So, for example, the cybersecurity insurance requirement, which was which we never actually enforced with the standards, is now formally a part of the standards. We, again, wanted to wait until our timeline for actually making the change. So most of those changes to requirements have already been applied or addressed. And most of the changes that we have made this year are simply clarifications to language in the standards that address more directly the intent of the standard, and looking back at what was submitted in the 2017 cohort to ensure that the standards reflect actual practice. And I think that's something that we are committed to, making sure that we rolled out these new standards, understanding, with the input from the network and understanding kind of how things were operating, but there's always kind of how that actually looks when we actually see what was presented as evidence may change. So that's what these tweaks were. I don't want folks to sort of be in a panic around those changes. It's important to review them and understand them, but for the most part, these are either pulled back requirements because we felt that we had addressed the best practice or the requirement or the risk area already in another standard or with another required indicator or requirement, and then mostly it's just simply clarification to language. One thing we did do also this year was, because of the launch of System 2.0 and the new system, we aligned some of the language within the student support standards to system. So there aren't new requirements or adjusted requirements within student supports. I know that you're in the middle of the school year at this point, but they are simply the requirements and standards now reflect what is asked for in system in terms of language. So I'm happy to discuss that. What you should know is that we are going to be launching those and communicating with the network around those tweaks in the coming weeks, and so you're welcome to join any of those communications and take a look at them once they are posted, but you're kind of getting a mini preview of them right now before the rest of the network, so we just wanted to flag this for you because you're all thinking about this process right now as you head into your reaccreditation.
Great. And with that, we have concluded the webinar, or the PowerPoint, I should say, presentation. And so we're happy to take questions. And I think a few came through. And of course, if you want to raise your hand if you have a question.
Yes, and folks, please stay on for the questions, but just to, I know Julie's mentioned this a couple times, stay on the line for the questions, but also we are about to do a demo of Box.com, so really encourage you to continue to stay on for this webinar. This isn't the end.
Yes, and I did book it. I should have booked it for an hour and a half. Hopefully it's on your calendars.
Any questions come through?
Yep, so one of the questions that came through was just a clarification about GYS and whether or not, if folks do not serve GYS schools, if there's an exemption request needed for that.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Paperwork's the better.
Yes, so absolutely not. If you do not serve, the GYS requirements are out there because a lot of our affiliates do serve GYS schools, and we have now implemented a few pretty minimal standards around those GYS schools. And so, these are things around school support agreements, data entry in system and collecting that, parent consent, those types of pieces. But having a GYS school is not a requirement. So the only requirement is there are standards related to that if you have GYS schools you must meet.
Another question that came through, which I think is really good to sort of reiterate for folks, is sort of when a standard asks for proof of practice to be placed in the previous 12 months, does that cover the period of June 1st, 2017 to May 31st, 2018? And that's totally correct.
Yes.
So if we're asking for board minutes for the previous 12 months, we're starting for that period. If we're asking for board approval within the past 3 years, we are going to be using sort of that June 1st, 2018 date and going backwards 3 years from there and hoping to see a board approval from within that period of time.
Right, and I know that that's not always like the best timing for you all. Your fiscal years may be, you may have a October to September fiscal year, you may have a June to July fiscal year, whatever the case may be, and that has an impact. We consider that within our review. So, you can a good example of this would be if you have quarterly board meetings instead of monthly or bi-monthly board meetings, and you back out a full year and haven't had that final fourth quarter of a board meeting. If you add an additional quarter onto the beginning of that documentation, we would accept that full year, if that makes sense. So, you know, if you do not have documentation to be able to provide, we will adjust our review timeline based on that, but kind of the standard timeline is, as you mentioned, that May through June, and we'll work within kind of your affiliate operations based on that.
So I don't see any other questions in the chat box, but we do have a couple of hands raised. I don't have the ability to unmute on my computer.
Got it. Okay.
So if we want to start with the folks who have their hands raised here, we can start with,
and actually I'm just going to quickly repeat the review timeline. So all documentation is due on June 1st of 2018. We will be getting reviews and do reviews from basically June through September, October. We turn around reports to the governance committee, again, September, October. They vote. They only meet once a month, which also gives you an insight into why it's a little bit difficult to get them all 39 reports at the same time. That would be a very long meeting. And so then we will let you know in the fall or winter of 2018. And you will receive an official report from us and a follow-up phone call.
So I see a hand up here for Michelle Finley. So Michelle, we're going to unmute you here so you can go ahead and ask your question. Yep, go ahead, Michelle.
Okay. Oh, no, you answered my question. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. That's what we like to hear. Yes.
Let's see. Who else do I see hand up?
I think other hands went down, so we're okay.
Okay. And Michelle, if you don't mind, just your hand shows on mine still up. So I think you have to click it again, maybe.
All right. And can you briefly outline the expectation for the state office role in the process?
Yes, absolutely. So state offices operate sort of differently state by state in terms of how they approach TQS. So depending, I would, one, reach out to your state office to determine that. Our expectations from a national office standpoint, and because as these are listed out in the state office standards, is that state offices are supporting their affiliates, either providing resources or directing them to national resources in support of affiliates who may be updating policies or procedures. They're providing some guidance there. We typically expect state offices to understand how Box.com works so that they can provide some troubleshooting if they need to. We also, just so folks know, I think affiliates in particular, but state offices should know this because it's a fairly a well adhered to practice. We reach out to state offices typically either prior to or in conjunction with our outreach to affiliates. So the communications that we're talking about, we typically, even if you communicate with us directly at the national office around TQS and you reach out to Julie, myself, or Kelly with an email, unless there is some circumstance where it does not make sense to include the state office in our response, even if you did not include them, we typically CC them on the response back. We understand there's some sensitivities there potentially, and so of course we'll respond to that as appropriate. And, you know, state offices may communicate with us directly and ask that we don't quite yet inform affiliates of some of these discussions, and that's just based on, again, sensitivities and appropriateness of the communication, and so we'll take that into consideration as well. But state offices are typically supporting affiliates through this process. Some state offices will conduct initial reviews of affiliate documentation as they go through this as well, to let you know, hey, we don't think that the governance committee or that the review teams are going to accept this and make it to a finding. If you want to change, here are some resources or some support that we can provide. We do recommend that affiliates don't always, you know, if your state offices should have the capacity to support you in the TQS and reaccreditation process. So please reach out to them as well. They are another resource for you. We really encourage that. Like I said, if we respond to a question from an affiliate regarding TQS, we almost always include the state offices on our response to make sure that they're aware of what we are communicating to affiliates within their network so that we can be consistent around those communications, and also if those questions come up to them, that they have the answers as well. So I hope that answers your question about the role. We are also going to be doing direct outreach to network support folks in state offices coming up around this process, just to talk with them about what they're doing, some challenges and concerns and questions they have. So if there are some folks from state offices on the call, which there may be, that just be aware that we'll be reaching out to you shortly to set up a teleconference to talk kind of offline about any concerns or questions that you all have about the support you're providing affiliates, or if you want to flag some things for us with regard to your state network, you know, kind of things that are commonalities among your affiliates, or any kind of red flags that you want to raise for us to make sure we're aware of as we begin our reviews.
We just had a question. If you've already uploaded things multiple times, you don't need to take them down and put in box notes. Thank you, first of all, for already uploading, and secondly, I don't want to make more work on you by having you delete what you've already diligently uploaded. However, that does bring up an excellent point about please do not wait until May 31st to start uploading your documents. There's quite a few things, and I would advise as you kind of go through them and as you have your board meetings that you spend some time after each kind of to upload your box.com. We said there's a question here about not clear on the dates that we're going to be reviewing. So we will. So if your fiscal year starts, let's say July 1st so right now you're probably in fiscal year 18. Your fiscal year probably started July 1st of 2017 to June 30th of 2018, for example. We will look at, you know, if you have board meeting, I mean, we can look at board meeting minutes from June of 2017, but we would probably look at July onward as long as you're hitting the one board meeting a quarter requirement.
Right. We need to see 12 months worth of documentation. Depending on where June 1st fits within what is appropriate for you all in terms of your 12 months and what you're able to demonstrate, that may shift. So essentially what I would say is the previous 12 months prior to June 1st, some folks, because of their board processes, perhaps minutes have not been approved, so they don't want to submit them from May, for example, so they may go back another to the previous one, you know, back 1 year, so that, or sorry, 1 month, to make sure that they are demonstrating a full 12 months, and we will consider that. So if we see, you know, continuous processes from May to May, essentially, from the previous year, we will assume that those processes are continuing into, I'm sorry, I'm getting that mixed up. From April to April, we will consider that, or assume that you are continuing those processes in May, even if you're not able to provide the final documentation from May, if that's when your board meeting is held or when you approve minutes, et cetera. Also, the reason I brought up fiscal years is because between financial reviews, audits, when Form 990s get submitted and posted on your website, all of that, your fiscal year will be taken into consideration based on whether you have completed certain things. So we usually provide a larger window around some of those things, like audits, for example, where we require an audit in the last year, but those audits may not have been completed for the most recently closed out fiscal year by the time you come up for your reaccreditation, so we may look further back. So we just want the most recent documentation of any previous year's documentation, if that makes sense. So whatever is the most current, we will look for. If we look at that and say, we're not sure that this is the most current, so if we have an audit from a fiscal, it feels like a fiscal year one fiscal year too early or not current, we will ask you and say, is this really the most recent one? Are you in the process of completing your audit? Can you let us know when that will be completed so we can consider that part of our review, or if it's not, if the timing won't work out, then we will consider the one that you have submitted. But we will reach out if there's some questions around that.
Great. So in the spirit of, I love the questions that are coming in, but I also do want to show you that demo. And so I think we're going to pause from the questions so you can come back at the end, or of course we've had my email here that you are more than welcome to you know, send me lots of questions via email. And so now we're going to move over to the demo of Box.com portion. So, alrighty. So, I just want to minimize this. Welcome to CIS of Honolulu. I am Jane Prudence, who's the Executive Director. Notice how I just switched personalities just right there. And we are going to walk you through kind of the documentation. So the first thing that I want to show you is in the browser. This is CIS of Honolulu's 2018 Reaccreditation folder. And this should look very similar to your reaccreditation folder. Also, a side note, I'm going to try to go very slow because I know that there might be some lapses with the technology. If I'm going too fast and you can't, you need me to slow down even slower, let me know. Kelly will see the note and I will slow down. So as I mentioned, affirmations, click on this. We have the guide, which if you click on it, pulls up, can make my notes for the ED, can make my notes for the board chair. Not required, of course, but if you find helpful. Notice, as I mentioned, the 2018 name in the document. This is how you know you're answering the correct questions. We have revamped the questions from 2017 to 2018. Back to the original folder. We have business documents. We have board operations. And this is where this required board approval calendar comes in. So if you look up here, this is the calendar that CIS of Honolulu has already started filling in. You can see here that they actually completed their mission statement on January 13th of 2015. So that will get uploaded in the minutes for periodic board approval. And you can see here, CIS of Honolulu mission statement approval from January of 2015. If I go back and go back to my calendar, you'll just notice, as you saw in that folder, March of 2017, we did our business continuity procedures and our record retention. And that was also, those minutes were also located in that periodic minutes folder. We just had a board meeting in January of 2018. We meet every other month, so you'll see that we have passed some things in July, we passed some things in September. Moving down, we passed some things in November, our financial monitoring we do every quarter with the board. We had a retreat in September with our board, so we did our AOP and our strategic plan, and we included that. And then we did a follow-up in November of the plan. But this past Tuesday when we had our meeting, we actually passed this very robust employee handbook. And the employee handbook covers financial management, personnel policies, and volunteer policies. So now what am I going to do, since we just had this? Well, first of all, I'm going to save this document. And then secondly, I'm going to go to my browser, and I see here the most recent 12 months for board meeting, and I click on it, and we just met, like I said, in January, and I click on it. There are no items in this folder. That makes perfect sense. And I go over here to upload, and I'm going to grab my file. And oh my goodness, it's very small. I can make this bigger. But if you can see here, we have CIS of Honolulu minutes, January of 2018. I click, I open, it's going to upload, and there it is. So now I've uploaded the minutes. So coming back out, back to board policies, coming back out again to business documents. So we'll now just continue through the folders. Keep in mind that I did tell you that I had that robust employee handbook that I'll be uploading since we just passed several policies in that handbook on Tuesday at our meeting. So board staff and volunteer. So here is that tracker. Again, not required, just helpful. And of course, if you wanted to if you actually wanted to download it, you could do that too. You could download, just right-click, and then I pull this up. It will show up momentarily. It's thinking. And you see here it has board, contact information, term start date, position, committee assignments, training, additional training. It has staff. This is in particular because of the background, so important because of the background check, the date of receipt for employee handbook, the date of your annual evaluation, and it has volunteer. And so you may use this if you think it's helpful as a way for you to track this information. And if you do decide to track it here, it does cover several of the standards. So that's that. If I go back here, so there's again a guide, and then if you decide not to track or if you want to provide additional information, it would, you'll go in this board, staff, and volunteer. And that's all explained in the guide. So now let's go back to business documents. We'll go to identity documents, and here I'm going to open up the guide because I want to see what I have to upload for identity. I know that there are several identity standards, standards 1 through 6 to be precise, but notice here that I only have to upload 2 things. So I'm going to upload my articles of incorporation, amendment to articles of incorporation, or an official letter from my state of Hawaii. Under 1.2, and I only have to do that now once. I mean, basically, I didn't have to go back to my state after being incorporated for 5 years and say, can you give me another letter? It's usually the original letter. And then also for branding, as needed. So the national office recently released in May of 2017 a new marketing plan, and so we got new business cards, and I'm going to just kind of upload some screenshots of how we've incorporated the new marketing plan into that. So moving back. So again, these folders are via the standard itself. So remember I told you I have that really interesting and robust personnel, employee handbook, personnel policies, volunteer, and financial management. So I'm going to decide to upload it into personnel. That seems like it makes the most sense. Oh, there it is. No, yep, there it is. So there we go. We already did that. Great. And what I'm going to go back and do is make a little note. So I'm going to go into 3.4. Over here, write a quick box note, and I'm going to say, these policies are included in our handbook. Please look in folder 3.5. Create. And it created a little note. So there it is. And there it is. Going back. I could do the same if I'd like in 3.6 if I wanted. And that would be that. A couple other things I wanted to show you in 3.8. We have a background check in 3.8. If you click on it, or if you download it, I'll download it because it's very small. We are requesting that you complete this as well. This is just a very, just a tracker to let us know when you've completed your background check. Is it opening? It is opening. Just give it one moment. And the thing that you'll need to note on this, show you, is that we do look at the date of hire with the initial clearance, with the initial clearance date with the date that you started working with students or data. So this initial clearance date will want to be before. And then with TQS 2.0, we do require background checks every 3 years. So you can see here that Chris Kringle and Rudy Reindeer had to go through recent, and his would be out of date, and we will have to run that again before June 1st. And you will see that his is good since it's December of 16. So that's that, and you can find that right in 3.8. Alrighty. I was just going to quickly, do you have something to add?
Just one note, just because this was the example, and I know that this has come up several times. If your background check procedures do sort of continuous checks, you do not need to provide like clearance dates for, or timelines, or whatever the case may be of those subsequent checks, if you have sort of an ongoing clearance process. So some folks contract with or they work with school districts that contract with background check vendors that are sort of doing a continuous check. So anytime there is a criminal record hit, it will update the individual, any individual who has submitted a staff member for background check. So you don't need to do that. What we would recommend you do, though, is make sure that in your background check procedures, your policies that you've written, that you've included that your vendor does ongoing checks versus the every 3 years. Just helpful for us to know, and it's clear for folks who want to understand what your background check process is, but we would do some follow-up with you anyway on that if we notice it, but it's good to have that in writing.
And then, actually I'm going to do parent-guardian consent. So note here that what's required is not the blank form on parent-guardian consent. It is the actual procedures of how you go ahead and confirm that you've received parent-guardian consent, as well as the consent form that you will fill out. So you'll upload your procedures and fill out the form. And that's outlined in the guide, which is right here. So I know I only have a few minutes, and I just wanted to show you two more things. That is that I'm going to go all the way out to student support standards. And remember I mentioned that I'm going to rename my school. So it's Sunshine Elementary, and there it is. And now I can upload all the documents pertaining to Sunshine. I also just wanted to show you very quickly, oops, not that one, sorry. That's where the documents are housed. This is how it would look if you used BoxSync. So you can see here CS of Honolulu, the 2018 reaccreditation, the business has everything the same, and then if we actually go into, student support, you'll see Sunshine Elementary, see how it's synced, so it knew I was doing it online and already shows up on my desktop. So that concludes the demonstration. I know we only have about 2 minutes left for folks on the phone. Do we have any other questions?
And we can stay on a little bit longer after this meeting for folks that can, but feel free to hop off if you have other places to go. We want to be cognizant of your time, but we're welcome to stay on it, or happy to stay on and answer any questions that you may have outstanding.
And I just also wanted to quickly point out the National Resource Center. As I mentioned, we've created a lot of resources in the past year. Specifically under accreditation process and standards, you can find a list of our webinars under affiliate standards. These are all the webinars that we did last year by standard. And if you click on them, it will open up into the presentation and you can download the PowerPoint slides. I'd also recommend, if you go back out to the beginning, that you check out the nonprofit operations page. There's a lot of information here about strategic plan, annual operations plan, record retention, basically all of the nonprofit operations things, which is why it's on the nonprofit operations page. So do we have any other questions? Otherwise, we are happy to end the webinar. Or hands raised. I'm sorry?
Just a question that just came through. So uploads for school standards 1.3. Do affiliates not need to upload PDFs of school need assessments?
They do not. So you only, so I will say that I'm not sure who asked that question. But what's that?
Captain Esposito.
Okay, so yes, for those affiliates who are using SysDem, we do not need your needs assessments uploaded because those should be captured in SysDem.
And 1.5, do we not need to upload any samples of signage, name tags, etc.?
That's correct. We found that was just not, it was just kind of a cumbersome thing, especially since we require the branding, in which you saw in Business Standard 1.4. So we felt that that was sufficient to prove that you're using, our logo correctly and things like that. And ergo, we cut the requirement upload for 1.5 under Student Support Standards.
We had a question about Box. So can you use the copy option in Box.com versus the note to meet multiple requirements?
Sure.
Yeah,
yeah,
you can absolutely
that's an easy way.
Copy and paste those same policies. We'll review them in that section that is there.
Yes, there's actually, what they're referring to, Kelly, is there's a copy function, a copy and move function within the folders, which, just so folks know, that is if you are an advanced Box user, which it sounds like this individual is, you can use that. There's an option to copy or move folders and files around your Box.com folder and whatever you have access to. So if you are maintaining things prior to us launching the folder structure somewhere, that is an easy way to say, copy this into this folder, copy that into that folder, versus kind of having to move things around or upload more than one time. So yes, absolutely, you can do that. And yeah, so all of the Box.com functionality you want to take advantage of, please do.
We're monitoring the participant box too, so if you'd like to raise your hand and ask your question out loud, we can do that as well.
I don't see anybody. Yes, Catherine. So we just got a question saying that can we use Box.com for other cloud-based storage purposes?
Yep.
Definitely. That box is available for you if you would like to, like Chris mentioned, store documents that you don't want the national office to have access to. You can create a folder that is outside of that affiliate name and sort of create that separately. You can monitor who has access to it, and that's kind of entirely yours to use.
Right. So once you sign up for a free account, you have kind of free reign to Box.com and most of the functionality. We have an enterprise-wide account, which allows us to provide the extensive kind of folder structure and invite a lot of external folks from our organization in. If you, depending on how large your affiliate is and how much you want to use Box.com and how much you want to share both internally and externally within your organization, there are some limits to the free account, but for what we have set up for TQS, you would just need the free account, and I would recommend taking advantage of that and using it as a cloud storage option for you. They do backups of all of your documents. I don't know if folks remember our incident last year where we were in the middle of a couple of different reviews, and our Box.com account received a kind of virus document in several folders that created challenges around the network, but particularly at the national office, and sort of shut down our use of Box. Box.com backed up those files, and so we were able to restore I think actually 100% of the things that had been impacted by that. And then, so there's a lot of functionality there. And just, again, to reiterate what I said and then what Kelly said, if you keep anything within the folders that we have created, that means we have access to them. We will be, appropriately professional and will not, we're not going to just go in and review folks, start looking at documents as you're uploading them unless they are related to TQS and you're under review. It's not, we don't scan Box for updates constantly or uploads from affiliates. So if you want to use those folders for your own purposes and how you want to change them or manipulate, that's fine. However, if you would prefer to keep things, for your own internal purposes, or local purposes for an affiliate, and not have us have access to them or state offices have access to them, you would want to keep them outside of the folders that we created. And then you would be the owner of that, and you would be able to block access, change access, all of that. Anything in our folders we automatically get. We are automatically the owner of the folder and therefore control access to it.
So there was a question about should we create additional subfolders for each school site? That's not necessary, but if you find it helpful, for example, if you want to, in my example with CAS Honolulu, if I wanted to create, I think I closed it, a subfolder for Sunshine Elementary that said, per standard. Maybe I have a site coordinator folder under there, and that's where I upload the site coordinator. Maybe I have a parent guardian consent form folder, and that's where I would put that. That's fine if you think that that's easier. Otherwise, you don't need to create subfolders. It's not a requirement, but you can do it.
Yeah, and I would say just the reason we didn't create subfolders is that we now actually ask for a fairly minimal amount of documentation, uploaded documentation by school, because so much of that is now captured in system. So we can see a lot more in system, such as the needs assessment, as our question came up earlier. So.
That actually leads really well into the next question, which is just kind of pushing on that point around not having to upload student needs assessments. Is any data that is kept live in system needed as a proof point to be uploaded? So are we going to be referencing system to check those documents, or do they need to be uploaded as well?
If you, sorry, Julie, but if you have entered the data in system, we will pull the report.
Yes, and actually, if you can see on the screen, I just pulled Student Support Document Guide, and you can see that what's grayed out there is things that we'll be accessing via system. So the only things that you need to upload are this little for each school, for the designated site coordinator, and then the copy of the parent guardian consent. So all of these things in here, can't click on it, will be, these things in here will be will be confirmed with our system.
Yep, and so if you look at the standards, it says in a lot of them that system says X, or system data indicates X, and we will pull the data from system to do that. So most student level information, we would, so just so you know, and most of you probably already know this team does not have access to student level data within system. We can only see aggregate. So any student level standards that need to be addressed, whether it's like the completion of needs assessments, progress monitoring, all of that, they come out in the TQS data report, and it would indicate the number of students having had that completed throughout the year, and then we would verify that way. We don't go into individual student records to verify that needs assessments are completed, because the report indicates to us the percentage of needs assessments completed of the students that are currently on your caseload.
All right, so are there any other questions that we can answer? We are a few minutes over time. I thank you so much for being with us. I'm just going to pause. I don't see any coming in. I think we answered everything in the chat, Kelly, that I saw, unless I missed something. Wonderful. Well, on behalf of the National Office, my name is Julie Dennis, Chris Murray, and Kelly Mears. Thank you for joining us today. We know that we went over time, but we hope that you found this informative, and be on the lookout for additional emails in the future about Reaccreditation 2018. Have a great Friday.